What's up, guys? I'm Chad Barnes, and welcome to the channel. Here, it's all about real car talk, from simple fixes to smart driving tips and keeping your ride in top shape. If that sounds good to you, go ahead and give the video a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button, and make sure you watch all the way through. There's a lot of good stuff coming. Let's get to it.
The model of a compact family car C-Class called C4 is present in the Citroen lineup since 2004, 4 years after the transition of the Citroen brand to the numerical system of designation of models. The car, which replaced the Citroen Xara, was built on the PF2 platform. For body types, a lineup of 7 gasoline and 2 diesel engines, 4 transmission options and saturation with modern technologies predetermined its worldwide popularity. The C4 was assembled in France in the city of Mulhouse in Argentina at the El Palomar plant and in Rouen, PRC. But after 6 years, it was time for a generational change. The debut of the novelty took place at the Paris Motor Show 2010. The car was built on the same PF2 platform, but in order to avoid market cannibalization with the DS3 model, it was decided to abandon the 3-door body. In general, the design of the second-generation C4 turned out to be somewhat less eccentric than the first. Initially, a 5-door hatchback went into production, which was later joined by a sedan, developed initially for the Chinese market, and received its own name Dongfeng Citroen C4 Sega in 2012. Well, since in April 2010 the PCMA plant in Kaluga joined the list of Citroen plants, the Chinese variant was chosen for local assembly in Russia, which started in April 2013. Before that, hatchbacks imported from France were officially sold in Russia. All cars on the Russian market received the Russian package, i.e. increased ground clearance 170 mm for the hatchback and 176 mm in the case of the sedan due to different shock absorbers and springs. The car inherited the suspension schemes from the first generation, McPherson struts in the front, semi-independent suspension with torsion beam in the rear. Of the wide range of engines we are interested in, 4 most common in Russia gasoline engines, 2 of which belong to the family developed jointly with BMW Prince. These are 1.6 VT, with multi-point injection and throttle-free intake with 120 horsepower and turbocharged version of the same engine EP6 CDTMD, aka 1.6 THP, with 150 horsepower. In addition, in Russia you can often meet cars equipped with an atmospheric 115 horsepower EC5 engine and somewhat less often, 110 horsepower TU5 JP4 with a cast iron block, which belongs to the previous generation of Citroen motors. Both of these engines also have a displacement of 1.6 liters. 1.6 THP turbo engines were combined exclusively with 6-speed automatic Aisin, 120 horsepower motors with a 5-speed manual or 4-speed automatic AL4, developed back in 2001, and engines with less power, only with manual 5-speed gearboxes. In 2016, the car underwent a restyling, and 120 horsepower engines began to be paired with 6-speed Aisin automatic transmissions. However, the production of updated sedans in Kaluga did not last long, until 2018, when the company decided to focus on commercial vehicles, and further conversation will be about the pre-restyling C4 of the second generation, the most massively represented in the Russian secondary market. Prices for this car today look very attractive. They start from 300 to 350,000 for cars with mechanics and large, up to 500,000 kilometers mileage and end with amounts of 1 million rubles for cars in the maximum configuration with mileage less than 100,000 kilometers. However, before deciding to buy a used Citroen C4, it is worthwhile to familiarize yourself with what their owners write about these cars. What can we say? The public mind has firmly established the idea of French brand cars as something capricious and expensive to maintain, and therefore ruinous for the owner. And if some specific models have proved their hardness and endurance in conditions of severe Russian reality, the public will immediately remember about peculiar solutions in the field of ergonomics. In general, the French are such a French. Citroen C4 2010 C. It is worth recognizing that there are certain grounds for such statements in the case of Citroen C4. Looking through reviews of owners, it is quite possible to find very negative opinions. The car is raw, junk complete. If you have free time to go to car service centers, then buy. If not, The choice of brands is huge. Car chauvinets. If you haven't spent 10,000 rubles this month on its repair, you'll spend 20 next month. Or here is such a chilling story: after repair, I safely handed in the trade-in for 327,000, exhaled and crossed my heart, no more French. How much has been invested in it, I can't count. For this money you could take a normal car, complains the owner. I advise you to think hard before you take it. Everything bad that they write about it is true. It broke everything that is weak in it. It's understandable that it's just one of those things. But how can you be sure you won't get the same one? A great many Citroen C4 owners tell in their reviews that before the purchase all their friends and acquaintances dissuaded them from this fateful step. The first reaction of those who learned about my purchase: what are you? Are you out of your mind? Are you completely out of your mind? Citroen sucks. And these prejudices have taken hold very firmly. The author of one of the reviews first said that for 100,000 kilometers of mileage he had nothing broken at all, and then honestly admitted, I put 4 points for reliability, because I am convinced that the Frenchman cannot not break. And in very many reviews their authors admit that they had prejudices too, but real life made them reconsider their opinion about French brands in general and Citroen C4 model in particular. Contrary to popular opinion, I bought a Frenchman and did not regret. I have long been an adherent of the idea that Frenchmen should not be taken. I am ashamed that I believed in it. Nevertheless, owners admit that in ordinary services masters do not like to deal with this car very much, and the engine scares them as rather complicated and demanding, and it is not too convenient to service C4. Under a hood everything is very dense. To remove a battery or to replace an air or oil filter, it is desirable to have a couple of extra joints on hands. As a result, the reviews are full of testimonies of problems that arose solely due to the poor work of service technicians. There are two sides to every coin, and the prejudice against the French car industry has two consequences. Firstly, Citroen C4 is absolutely not interesting for car thieves. It is not hijackable. Citroens in general rarely even get into ratings of hijackings, and if they do, they are at the very bottom. I calmly leave it in a common parking lot near my house, thanks to Russian stereotypes. And secondly, according to the general opinion, all this greatly affects the price of Citroen C4 on the secondary market. It is almost unreal to find something for such a price, with such a level of comfort, options, materials and quality of finishing in the market of cars with mileage, as the French in our country are greatly underestimated. What does a Russian person usually associate with the word of France, apart from wine, cheese and cuisine? Of course, style, elegance, refinement. And in this respect Citroën cars do not deceive the expectations of their owners. Even authors of frankly negative reviews, by the way, quite few, write, probably, I will not buy French anymore. Although these devils are bribed by design and creative technologies. Those who like the car are not shy in enthusiastic epithets: attractive and stylish look outside and inside, futuristic interior. An exterior design. The first time I saw it in the salon, I was brought up by its appearance. There are, of course, and more calm assessments. Someone believes that only the design of the front part can be called really outstanding, otherwise, SOSO, ordinary-looking car. Someone believes that the car is cute, but it can be more beautiful, though, and more expensive. But somehow I have not come across any negative evaluations of C4 appearance. From the French approach to design we can expect that the interior design of the car will be no worse than the exterior. And again Citroen C4 does not deceive owners' expectations: cosmic dashboard with a special night mode. No one else has such, and after it I do not even want to look at ordinary arrows, a peculiar front panel, purely French, speedometer. With a good saucer, in the middle the speed in figures, and a small speedometer arrow moves around the circle. My wife saw it on the third year. It is very important that owners are pleased not only with the overall architecture, but also with the materials used. Competitors from Korea or other Europeans will not offer you so much comfort and plushes for this price. Everything will be either much more expensive or made of poor quality materials. All this makes owners write real enthusiastic essays about their cars. And they also please their owners with the presence of a lot of pleasant little things, which we will talk about. Fans of Fenix, style and the like, especially those who know how to notice them, will definitely like Citroën. Alas, little things are not only pleasant. For Citroen C4 the problem with peeling paint on the front edge of the hood is very typical, at least, references to it are very common. Hood replacement and painting. The paint has swollen at the joint, hood replaced under warranty, the edge has swollen. It is clear that in case of buying a car with mileage, no warranty is out of the question. Paintwork defects can be found on more than just the hood. The door seals rubbed through the paint. We cured it by replacing the seals and painting, but a year passed, and again in the same places similar scuffs went. Kaluga assembly is crooked. After the factory the trunk and hood clearances can go. From the cabin, a direct tip to adjust the gaps, the curvature chisels on the paintwork, making chips on the body the weak point of this car is the trunk lid. Often incorrect adjustment leads to damage to the paintwork on the end of the lid and the bumper, in addition, in the place of installation. On the trunk lid chrome molding due to contact of the latter with the metal conformer chip there are scuffs from the rubber bands. On the rear doors, complain the authors of reviews. When accepting the car, the authors of reviews strongly recommend paying close attention to how the trunk closes and the presence of scuffs. It happens that it is possible to close the trunk only from the 5th time, and that only after the use of physical force. Another topic related to doors, numerous complaints about problems arising in winter, the rear left passenger door after the onset of cold weather stopped closing, a factory defect due to violation of assembly technology, the cables froze at the first cold snap over, 10-something froze in the rear passenger door, and it did not open from the outside, and when opened from the inside, it did not slam. In winter time, the rear door locks freeze, and the car turns into a coupe. Yes, exactly, locks, not rubber bands, and this disease, as it turned out on the forum, not only me. And the main thing, only on the rear doors, with the front ones everyone is fine. Finally, there are a lot of reviews in which the authors express their dissatisfaction with the quality of the speakers installed in the doors. The speakers in the doors rattle as if they were not worth even a ruble instead of brilliant works of famous composers. I hear the rattling of the lid of a pot with boiling water simultaneously with the cries of March cats, factory acoustics, Chinese cardboard slag. But the owners evaluate the head unit itself in very different ways. Some are indignant, the music is disgusting, but I like quality sound, the tuner does not catch anything 70 kilometers away from Moscow. Others consider that the sound quality is average and is quite suitable for creation of unobtrusive musical background, and someone even notes that the sound, at least in the maximum configuration, is very decent. I am not a music lover, so the standard stereo with 6 native speakers is enough for me. But even a system with good sound, USB and hands-free can go wrong. Sometimes the stereo would freeze when working with Bluetooth, and I had to restart it. My favorite joke is to disconnect from the phone and not always connect back. At the same time, with the stereo off, the phone shows a connection, but no one can hear anyone. Guess what exactly you did wrong? By the way, in order to reboot the head unit, you need to press the CD eject button and hold it in this position for 5 seconds. Try to guess without studying the manual thoroughly. The owners of Citroen C4 are amazingly unanimous in their assessment of the interior. First of all, it is big, there is more than enough space for rear passengers. I sit behind myself and my fist fits in the reserve. To the front seat, my height is 185 centimeters, I do not rest my head on the ceiling from behind. And, perhaps, only on lack of an armrest and other useful options for rear passengers owners complain, from minuses, absence of elementary comfort for rear passengers, heating, airing, armrests, sockets, etc. Well, and those who often have to carry long items, for example, skis, do not like that there is no hatch in the back of the rear sofa, connecting the cabin with the trunk, and in such cases, part of the seat has to be folded. But the trunk itself was unequivocally praised by both hatchback and sedan. The trunk is not the largest in the class, but it is very roomy. There is a plus which nobody in class offers, the increased aperture of a trunk. It is not any problem to load not small baby carriage. And still remains a lot of place for accompanying things. Geometry at a trunk is excellent, with niches on sides. The trunk is big for the class, loading is more convenient than in Camry. The trunk completely satisfies us, the baby carriage quietly enters. A trip on stores, also no problems. And the owners also like the fact that in the trunk there is a full-size spare tire, not some roll cage. The owners are quite positive about the driver's comfort. They like the comfortable multi-controller, covered with high-quality leather, and quite comfortable driver's seats. The authors of reviews note that in hatchbacks assembled in France the lateral support is somewhat better, but in general everything is acceptable. At my size 52 and height 176, I feel myself in a chair perfectly. I do not need any additional lateral girths, nothing gets stiff, there is enough space, the car is very comfortable. Steering wheel adjustment, soft seats, spacious interior. I drove almost 700 kilometers in one go, and once I spent 12 hours behind the wheel, neither my back nor my legs got tired. There are, of course, certain nuances here as well. For example, in many reviews authors note high thresholds, because of which it is necessary to raise legs high if you do not want to dirty pants when leaving the car, or useless driver's armrest, which cushion is too far moved back, or not in the best way placed. Control of seat heating, but we will come back to French ergonomic oddities. But those who used to deal with cars of PSA concern are glad that at gas stations it is not necessary to run with a key for opening of a gas tank lid and then to drag with this wealth to the cash desk. It is enough just to press a button. And in general, there are a lot of pluses in the cabin. Among these pluses and very high-quality materials, which even after 100,000 kilometers of mileage do not look shabby, and excellent equipment. Owners directly write, the main factor that influenced the purchase was the presence of a large number of options, such as heated windshield and rear window mirrors, washer nozzles, heated front seats, separate climate control. In general, the sedan had all the functions and systems of a modern and technological car. I especially like the exclusive package, which included all the most necessary options and even more: rain and light sensors, dual zone climate control, hands-free, modern multimedia system with navigation, keyless access, nice white backlighting, which can be changed to blue, automatically folding mirrors. In general, my wife blossomed, and I realized that I do not want an ordinary C4, only exclusive. There is a lot of smart and customizable in the car illuminates turns, and even before turning the steering wheel, when the turn signal is turned on, illuminates the exit zone, escorts home, lowers mirrors, folds them by itself or by button, can automatically darken them. There is control of blind spots and adjustment of color and intensity of instrument lighting, which can be simply turned off by a separate button, leaving, for example, only the speedometer. There is a massager in front seats and their 3-stage heating. A removable flashlight with a battery works as illumination in the trunk. A set of warning sounds, signals, sounds and so on is customizable with a choice of 4 sound schemes. Very soft climate control, about which the author of the review wrote as follows: perhaps the same, on my memory, was only in Mercedes S320. Speed of work of wipers depends on speed of movement, and at movement backwards the rear wiper is included automatically. Some authors even complain about the fact that the car is too smart. I wanted to change the lamps of DHO for LED, so immediately noticed and began to beep all the time, notifying about the malfunction of parking lights. I had to return the usual bulbs. But even the author of a very negative review wrote, after this car it was difficult to change to something less equipped. The situation with visibility assessment is rather strange. On the one hand, the authors of many reviews write that visibility is excellent, although there is also evidence that if the driver is not seated correctly because of the interfering pillars, you cannot notice approaching pedestrians and vehicles, and on the other hand, very many owners express complaints about visibility to the rear. Small side view mirrors, as a consequence, large dead zones. By the way, a number of authors note that in bad weather the side mirrors get dirty very quickly. To someone it seems that everything is fine with the side mirrors, but the interior mirror does not show anything thickly, good visibility in the side mirrors, but the interior mirror is small. Well, in the aggregate, all this can lead to unpleasant consequences. Winter, snow, I stood in an unfortunate place, backed up, looked in the mirrors, clear, then the impact. There are garbage cans nearby. I thought I hit one of them. I go out, I look, there is a blue Aveo in the blind spot. The Parktronic did not work, because the sensor died. And failed rear parking sensors are not a rarity at all. The thing is that they are installed in the bumper too low, and when moisture gets on them, when it freezes, it destroys the sensors. Most often it happens in early spring and late fall. And the sensors themselves do not cause delight. A joint with the parking sensor, it shows the weather on Mars, but not the distance to the obstacle. But the owners are quite satisfied with the headlight. The headlights are very pleasant. The light is better than in Camry, though they are non-lensed. Halogen headlights shine perfectly. In addition, the illumination in the direction of the turn, a really necessary thing. The Citroen C4 has enough other unsuccessful ergonomic solutions. For example, an inconvenient cup holder, only cups fit in there, you can't put a bottle, and that's if the armrest is not unfolded. There are large compartments in front doors, where you can even shove small bags. The cup holder is small, only a 0.6-liter bottle can fit there, but the door pockets, at least 2 2-liter bottles can be put there. One more complaint refers to navigation. It is inconvenient to use navigation, to move the map, to choose a point on the map and to lay a route there. At these actions the number of keystrokes inexorably tends to the number of letters in my review. There is a certain dissatisfaction with the algorithm of media system control by means of keys on a steering wheel. It is necessary to press the button list at first, then to choose a radio station from the list, thus having turned the head and having transferred a sight from the road to the onboard computer. In general, horror. It is easier to press 1 2 3 inch on the center console. And the question, why having 4 window closers? It is impossible to close windows from the remote control, and it concerns a huge number of models. Not only Citroen C4 seems to me quite reasonable, but, perhaps, the most serious claims the owners express about seat heating. On the one hand, it is 3-level, and not many cars of higher class can boast something similar. But on the other hand, the control is very inconveniently located. It is switched on somewhere at the bottom. We have to do it by touch. But this is half the trouble. The trouble is that the heating elements, in the words of one of the owners, too evil. I would like to personally communicate with the developer of seat heating. While the car is warming up, I turn it on the minimum. And after about 5 minutes it starts to get so hot that I have to turn it off. What happens at levels 2 and 3, we can only guess. Probably a light grilling of the sirloin part, writes one of the authors. Preparing for localization of the sedan C4, Citroën engineers have done a good job on adaptation of the car to Russian conditions. And, perhaps, the main element of this preparation was an increase in ground clearance from 150 to 176 mm. By this indicator C4 is not inferior or only slightly inferior to a number of popular city crossovers. So, for example, Skoda Yeti has only 4 mm more clearance, and Kia Sportage of the 3rd generation has even a little less. Naturally, in the owner's reviews there are no complaints about too small clearance and insufficient cross-country ability, but stories about how will they cope with various difficult situations, on the contrary, have become a commonplace. First of all, owners of C4 feel very confidently during parking. I park without problems with a stop with a back wheel and a high curb. It is also a curb. Hello Moscow. Not hitting it with a bumper clearance will argue with the majority of parkettes. How to climb and get down from a curb? It is possible not to think at all, though it is better still to think of front and rear overhangs. Of bumpers here are quite acceptable for the majority of parking situations. I noticed that when sedan and hatchback stand next to each other, the difference from the ground to the front bumper is visible to the naked eye. Indeed, the clearance of hatchbacks is slightly less, 170 mm against 176. However, 170 mm is also quite decent. Such clearance allows not to limit the habitat of the car exclusively to the urban jungle or asphalt roads, amazing for such class cross-country ability. The ground clearance is excellent. I have never had any problems with snowdrifts in Moscow or when traveling outside Moscow. However, in order to feel confidently in snow, which covers our roads with depressing regularity, it is not enough to have a large ground clearance. Suspension and transmission and traction at low revolutions should play their parts. And here the car does not let down. Once I got stuck in a snowdrift. I decided to try the snowflake mode. It works. It came out like a Jeep, says one of the owners. Was pleasantly surprised by its behavioral reflexes on a snowy or icy road, echoes another. Many cars now have the option to select winter driving mode. In my previous cars, driving in this mode started in 2nd gear, but in the C4 you start right from 3rd gear, it feels like. There is no snow under the wheels, as if you were driving on a normal road, only a little slower. However, experienced owners warn that one should not lose caution. The ground clearance is enough to move not on roads, but on directions, but one should always remember that the suspension is soft and bumpers are expensive. In the city, owners of C4 really calmly park there, where drivers of other sedans and hatchbacks are afraid to catch lip of front or rear bumper. On unpaved roads, however, the long base eats away at this advantage, so be wary when driving over very rough and undulating roads. I paid for my carelessness on a dirt road with a rear bumper skirt and 2 Parktronic sensors. I had to replace them. The next loss was the skirt of the front bumper, which could not withstand a meeting with a tree stump on a forest road. I took it off, drove without it for a year, then changed it for a non-original. The original is fabulously expensive for plastic. Some consolation is that all vulnerable nodes under the belly of the C4 are covered with plastic protection. As for the suspension, it behaves well enough off the asphalt, showing commendable survivability. The suspension is excellent. It does not notice lying policemen at all. Now about the suspension, a lot of compromises are collected here. Now it is impossible to go dashing into a turn, roll is crazy, but potholes and absence of road as such under wheels will not make to refuse a trip. In general, it is possible to fry on graders calmly and with a sense of self-esteem. Russian winter is not only snow, but also general moros. However, in the reviews there are practically no mentions of any problems with winter starting of engines, even in very cold weather. A couple of cases are associated with very old and really tired batteries. In fact, on Russian cars a battery of higher capacity is installed. In addition, the car comes with a plastic cover, which should be installed in winter in the air intake at the bottom of the front bumper. It protects the radiator and helps to keep the optimal temperature mode of the motor. The main thing is not to forget to remove this cover in spring, otherwise you may face engine overheating in summer. Owners consider the availability of fully heated glass to be a very important point. The heated windshield is a wonderful thing. The glass freezes in 3 to 4 minutes. However, there are nuances here too. There is heating of a windshield and washer nozzles, but heating of a zone of rest of wipers is absent. That causes certain complaints. Wipers are recessed under a cowl and in winter freeze there together with washer nozzles. It is possible to unscrew them from ice only by opening the hood, which, in its turn, opens only when the driver's door is open. But if thermal glass is open in any frost, the interior does not freeze at all and does not mist up. In a word, air circulation in the cabin is organized very competently. The presence of headlight washers always leads to a large consumption of washer fluid, but, to the great joy of the owners, the designers have provided the C4 with a washer tank with a volume of 6 liters. Washer was poured not more than once a month, really enough for 3 to 4 weeks, even in slush. Like many models of mass segment, Citroen C4 has characteristic saws which have to face, if not absolutely all, then very many owners. The first of these problems is connected with rear semi-independent suspension. Symptomatology looks like this: crazy breakdowns of rear suspension, such that it seems that the rear beam is about to be torn off completely. I spent a month and a half looking for what the problem was. Found it: rear beam silent blocks. It is considered to be a chronic disease of this car. In principle, the designers were aware of this vulnerability, and according to the regulations the replacement of these silent blocks is provided at a mileage of 70 to 80,000 kilometers. But it is possible to not reach this milestone. It all started at 25,000 kilometers. There was a knocking noise when I passed the lying policeman or hit any bumps. In the prices of 2016, the replacement of the silent blocks together with the adjustment of the offset cost 7 to 10,000 rubles. In the current conditions, of course, more expensive. Anyway, the owners recommend to put more durable and reliable silent blocks from the Peugeot 308 SW station wagon. A little less frequently there are mentions about necessity of replacement of ball bearings of a front suspension and silent blocks of front levers, and as a whole about a suspension the owners write that it is not bad and very comfortable on small and average bumps, and a rear beam, though loses to a multi-lever on pits, but quite suitable for a city and thoughtful driving on a highway. As for the engines, the main problems are associated with the EP6 engines. The most radical owners can even write that both variants of this motor, an atmospheric with 120 horsepower and turbocharged for 150 horses, are disgustingly unreliable, vibration-loaded, temperature, both burn oil, and if they do not burn, they will start in 20,000. But there is one more plague peculiar to these motors: stretching timing chain. The timing chain began to jingle when cold, and a rattle could be heard at low revs under load. At 52,000 the chain rattled. The morning diesel was every morning until the replacement of the chain, which in 2017 cost 11,000 rubles, chain plus shoes plus tensioner plus gaskets. Often to correct this defect it is enough to change only the tensioner and the problem will be eliminated, but in services, as a rule, they try to change the chain together with the tensioner. To avoid these problems or to face them as late as possible, owners recommend to follow a few rules: never turn the engine still cold. Fill it only with good gasoline, well, and most importantly, to reduce the interval of oil and filter replacement to 7 to 8,000 kilometers. Alas, young people have a desire to drive, but there is no money for good gasoline, oil and more frequent visits to the service, so when buying a used C4 with EP6 engine, it is strongly recommended to preventively replace the chain with tensioner, especially if it is a version with 150 horsepower turbo motor. Well, and a lot of warm words owners addressed to 4-speed automatic AL4. There is an opinion that it is unreliable, pensive, brake, kicks. The last three claims should be considered fair. 4 stages are 4 stages, and the archaic nature of the design cannot be denied either. So there is nothing surprising in the fact that there are modes in which the box will make a mistake with the choice of gear, as well as in the fact that at a speed of more than 120 to 130 km per hour you will feel the lack of 5 to 6 gears. But everything is not so simple with reliability. AL4 boxes, which were equipped with Citroen C4 of the first generation, really had big problems with electronic control units, and their boards burned regularly, like Siberian tiger. The company solved this issue back in 2010, but, as they say, the spoons were found, but the residue remained. But not so long ago the price of repair AL4, as a rule, did not exceed 50,000 rubles, while in case of breakage of 6-speed box A's it was necessary to prepare 100 to 150,000 rubles or to go on a tour of dismantling. In its overwhelming majority the authors of reviews are quite satisfied with fuel economy of Citroen C4. Even the turbocharged EP6 CDT-MD, aka 01, 6 THP, is not moderate in needs. In general, as a rule, the average consumption in mixed mode is 8.4 to 8.5 liters 100 km in summer, increasing in winter to 9 liters. But if you abuse the gas pedal, the consumption can seriously increase. If you press the gas a lot, it consumes a lot, up to 16 liters 100 km. The most mass version of the car, equipped with an atmospheric 120 horsepower EP6 variant, can be called a middling. As a rule, the consumption in urban traffic jams is 9 to 10 L 100 km, on the highway from 5.2 to 6.5 L 100 km. However, some authors of reviews boast city consumption of 6-6, 5 liters per 100 well, and the average consumption can be safely estimated as 7, 2-7, 7 L 100 km. It is noteworthy that the owners do not report any significant difference in the consumption of cars with manual and automatic, and according to the figures that they call in their reviews, this difference is not seen. Approximately the same figures are called by owners of cars with 115 horsepower EC5, at quiet driving on the highway 6-6, 5 L 100 km, in the city up to 8 liters, with included air conditioner, and in winter, exactly 1 liter more. Well, about cast iron 110 horsepower TU5 JP4 owners write that this engine is very reliable, unlike the engines EC5 and EP6 quietly digests 90-second gasoline, but quite voracious on the highway 7 to 8, in the city 9 to 10 L 100 km, average consumption 7, 2-7, 8 L 100 km. This veracity is very relative, and the figures themselves do not cause special emotions. From reviews on the internet, you can get a lot of useful information regarding the cost of ownership of the Citroen C4. Of course, there is no complete unanimity, but the vast majority of owners are very positive about the cost of ownership. Firstly, very many mention the exceptionally cheap hull insurance. Secondly, they define the cost of ongoing maintenance as low. As for specific figures, for example, in 2016, the cost of maintenance could range from 7 to 15,000 rubles, depending on the amount of work performed, which is quite in line with the average level. As for the necessity of unscheduled repairs, everything is very different here. Certainly, nobody calls Citroen C4 a car which does not break down at all, but there are also enough evidences that the maintenance of the car has not become especially ruinous, including, in case of purchase of the car with a mileage, concerning reliability. In absence of which all reproach French cars, the car is very predictable, and for 7 years of possession and 135,000 kilometers of mileage unpleasant situations did not cause. It always started, did not get up on the road, and was never ridden on a tow truck. I took it in a very tired condition with oil build-up, but the car did not cause any unexpected troubles. The last statement is curious, because it was written already this year. During the operation, 2013 to 2022, in addition to TO changed only reverse sensor, died, Parktronic stopped working, battery, by 2018. Ran out, bought a new one, front levers, pads in the circle, brake discs, belts closer to 80,000, dust covers and rubbers, dried out closer to 80,000, engine protection, plastic, broke in the winter, while my father-in-law got there. It seems to be a solid list, but this is for 9 years. In fact, it makes no sense to describe all possible breakdowns. Everything that is made by man can break, but it is still worth stopping at a number of points. Firstly, owners strongly advise to find their service, whose employees specialize in repair and maintenance of PSA cars. Secondly, it is desirable to go to the service with a ready diagnosis. The French have a lot of electronics, and to make friends with the car, you need a wire, a laptop and diag box. If there is no wiring, any trip to the service turns into a divorce. We also want to eat, so please gild the hand, and then, of course, the car can leave without pants. But in principle, although there are complaints about electrics and electronics, they are not so numerous. But bodywork is best avoided. In 2016, there was an accident. The right headlight, bumper, radiator grille, hood painting cost 70,000 rubles, parts plus work were replaced. It should be noted that chrome parts are quite expensive. For example, a chrome grille with a chevron costs from 7,000 to 10,000 rubles. Buying a car, no one hopes that they will be together forever. It's time to sell it. And here the problems may well begin. On the secondary market there is a rumor about Citroen C4 as a very hard to sell model because of expensive service and expensive spare parts. Some authors of reviews even write down the low prestige of the brand and lack of demand on the secondary market in the list of the main disadvantages of this car. The main disadvantage, which you will definitely encounter, is the presence of a negative stereotype, which, of course, affects the liquidity. The owners write in their reviews. They give specific examples. After 6 months of ownership of this car, had to put it up for sale, and the second 6 months to sell it. I sold, I think, successfully, because after going to the sites for the sale of cars, saw copies that are still on sale since last year. But our life is a continuous dialectic, which means that a car undervalued and illiquid on the market can become a very profitable acquisition. The owners write about it directly and frankly. Russian people are still afraid of Frenchmen, and it is good. While you are afraid of them, they cost less, and we buy them, and you ride on stools. I once sat on my small and not particularly expensive Citroen, drove a bit and thought, how cool it drives, soft and quiet. Approximately so many owners formulate the general impression from Citroen C4, and not accidentally the words comfort and comfortable sound as a refrain in almost every review. We have already discussed convenience and comfort of interior, and now let's talk about what Citroen C4 is on the move. Let's begin with dynamic possibilities. It is clear that depending on the installed engine they will be different enough. In principle, the cars with 150 horsepower turbo motor 1, 6 THP and 6-speed automatics are considered by the owners to be quite fast. It accelerates very sharply. Frankly speaking, I did not expect such a quickness. I pressed the pedal lightly, look, and already 130, apparently, because of the low weight and good streamlining. The next 120 horsepower atmosphere engine, according to the owners, is very good in the city, but it is not so convenient on the highway. For the urban rhythm of movement 4AT and 120 horsepower is quite enough, but for long trips, traveling on serpentines this car is inconvenient. And 115 horsepower EC5 is still weak. I realize that 115 horses are nothing. It should be noted that the main claims of owners address not so much to engines, but to boxes and all variants. Here, for example, what they write about 5-stage mechanics, to formal minuses I would refer the setting of the gearbox. Turns on the 5th gear at a speed of 110 km/s about 3,300, and it is a lot. The car is not highway short, at 3,000 revolutions, speed 100 to 105. On the highway to drive at revs is not quite comfortable, but the dynamics pleases, cruise works perfectly. Mechanics have pleasant nuances. For example, the help at moving uphill works quite well. For a second or two, the car holds the brake for you, so you have time to engage the gear and move without rolling back. Even the Aisin 6-speed automatic is met with some grumbling. It seems to be a 6-speed automatic from Aisin, but it strangles the engine, does not allow you to move normally. It is difficult to explain, you should feel it. It is as if someone holds the car from behind. But it is rare. Basically, this box owners are quite satisfied with it. But the 4-speed AL4 gets a lot of complaints. The 4-speed box spoils everything. If not for it, the car could be at a point. It is very slow. It is almost unreal to make sharp maneuvers on overtaking on this box, or you need to know how to do it. However, there are also those who have adapted, got used to it and even started to enjoy it. AL4 behaves best of all on medium traction. You press the gas a little, so 30% of the possible, and do not release the pedal until the box switches to 2, 3, 4. If you drop the revs, it will get confused and the shifts will be felt. And also owners strongly recommend to warm up the box thoroughly in winter. I advise to warm up the car in winter not less than 10 minutes at strong minus 15 minutes, or you will feel jolts from first to second until the oil in the box warms up. At the same time, the owners of all versions praise brakes. Although a very light pedal needs to get used to, brakes are just fabulous. All disc brakes, by the way, brakes are just great. The brake pedal is for ladies, very light. Brakes are a separate song, very sensitive. And also in many reviews authors praise noise insulation, though with some reservations. Good noise insulation for this class of cars. The only thing that can be heard is the noise of wheels and a little bit of the engine. When you press the pedal to the floor there is a slight growl, which is even pleasant to the ear. But not everyone agrees with such assessments. There are such opinions. There is no noise insulation in C4 now at all minus lack of noise insulation. There is no noise insulation on the hood at all. But what is not there you can add. By 75,000 kilometers I timed the full noise insulation. I drive now, I enjoy it. The noise from the wheels has become much less. Finally, such crucial and interrelated components of driving comfort as steering, smoothness and suspension performance. In general, there are no serious claims to them. Steers clearly at speed without frightening rolls, as on Jeep type. At the same time, the authors of reviews recognize the presence of certain limitations. The car is soft, comfortable, but not for racing. A decent roll and rocking on the bumps, but not tooth crusher. The suspension is soft and short stroke, in general in the city and especially on the highway on the car to go one pleasure, but hard bumps the car cannot swallow. Well, and in very many reviews authors write that Citroen C4 does not like longitudinal rutting. You can't fall asleep in a rut, only manage to steer on MKAD in a rut. The rudder dances in hands. And in conclusion, it is necessary to emphasize once again that Citroen C4 is a typical quiet family car, and it will not suit a person with driving ambitions. In conclusion, the Citroen C4 II presents a compelling choice for many drivers, thanks to its stylish design, comfortable interior, and advanced technology features. However, potential buyers should also consider the drawbacks, such as its performance limitations and potential reliability concerns. Ultimately, whether to buy or not to buy the Citroen C4 II depends on your personal preferences and priorities. Weighing these 5 reasons will help you make an informed decision that best suits your needs. Thank you for watching, and we hope this video has provided valuable insights into the Citroen C4 II.